After hundreds of years of traditional Senate representation in Congress, some are advocating for a change that will hurt the very democracy of our nation itself. The Senate is extremely important to our lives today as it passes laws and legislation that can directly affect our lives and in the generations to come. Currently, we have 2 senators representing each state in the Senate level, which is a very strong, effective method, as opposed to a newly proposed method of 2 senators for the top 25 for each top 25 populated states, and only 1 senator for each bottom 25 populated states. We will discuss in this speech the voice of lower populated states, the congressional equilibrium at stake, and the values of having the traditional system over the newly proposed system. So first off, the current system allows for lower populated states to still have a voice, whereas the newly proposed system takes away their voice altogether. Taylor Millard said in his article, The Left's Complaints About the Equal Representation in the Senate, that James Madison realized the importance of equal representation in Congress. James Madison put it, the tyranny of majority, which pretty much means that the large states are drowning out the small states, and that the small states aren't having the voice that they need to have in the Senate. So they created this system in order to have a system of checks and balances, to pretty much keep the larger populated states in their place. Hans Noel said in his article, The Senate Represents States, Not People, that the states are not protected from by the federal government by mere parchment barriers. They need to defend themselves through the Senate. The Senate helps the smaller populated states to still be able to protect themselves, to still watch their own backs, and to have a voice in some of these matters. Whereas if we pass this new system that gives the lower populated states less of a voice, they'll be run over, they'll be trampled by the larger populated states, and their voice will be drowned out in all of this. My opponent may claim that in examples such as Wyoming having less of a population, but they still have They still have 2 Senate votes, and California has a much greater population, and they have 2 Senate votes. However, this keeps an equilibrium in the Senate, and the House makes up for this because the House is based on population. The Senate gives equal rights to all states. So if we take this away and we make both of them based on population, then the smaller states are going to get drowned out and the larger states are going to practically have too much of a say in everything. Which leads us to our second point. The current system allows for an equilibrium in Congress, but the proposed system will put Congress in a disproportional state. The Senate is pretty much a counteractive measure to the House. The Senate gives everyone equal voting rights, whereas the House bases it on population, as said. Amanda Onion put it in her article, How the Great Compromise in the Electoral College Affects Policy Today, and talks about the Great Compromise in 1787 that gave the small and large states both what they wanted. The small states wanting representation by equal representation, and the larger states wanting representation by population. However, the newly proposed method is going to take that away, and 250 years later, the smaller populated states aren't just going to let that fly. In fact, it's going to cause a huge uproar, and it's going to really shake our country to the roots if this is even proposed, because it's taking away democracy and the power, any power of the smaller populated states. Lastly, the current system has done well, and the new system is pretty much just a shot in the dark. Jay Cost said in his article in defense of the Senate, we should be wary of casting aside an institution simply because we have an idea of how to replace it. Just because we can replace the Senate with a new structure, a new system, doesn't mean we necessarily should. Granted, even if this new structure were to work better than our current structure, which it wouldn't, the Constitution really wouldn't even permit it, because the Constitution and the Senate are kind of, we can't really change it too well, and it would cause, we'd have to rewrite the Constitution to change some of these Senate matters, and that would be very hard in these times right now of political turmoil, as well as our nation was kind of founded on the Constitution. This would just be extremely risky, and it would cause even more issues in the time to come. So in conclusion, the government is far from perfect, obviously. There are some issues that need to be addressed, but the Senate is not one of them. Our Senate is a very strong system. It keeps a good equilibrium with the Senate and the House, and taking away our current Senate structure and changing it to one based on population will throw it into a disequilibrium, and it will take away the voting rights and ultimately the democracy of the United States. Thank you.